Nice to meet you. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I know it's kind of early where you are right now.
Yeah, it's 10 a.m. Just had a little bit of hecticness getting the kids out the door. We're family's with me at the moment on the start of this New Zealand tour.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's doubly hectic.
It's hectic.
Oh, man. Yeah. Have you toured with family a lot? Is that something you do often?
No, like we did the first run. It was this last 2 months previous through the States. I just did a bunch of festivals, kind of finishing a really, really busy time. And they came over to hang out for 2 months and then did some trips around, drove down the West Coast. And then, this is the first time they're kind of all with me. Doing
so
shows.
This is like the first time you're really trying this for like a tour?
Probably not in the future. It's more like it worked out time-wise. Like I'm from New Zealand, so they came to see family as well. But yeah, I don't think it's too hectic. It's like taking your kids to work day.
Yeah, every day, right?
Every day.
And every day your office moves several hours away.
Yeah, imagine how painful it is going through the airport by yourself and trying to do it with kids extra. It's crazy.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
that's all. I mean, because just having kids in a family by itself is a lot of work, man. And
yeah.
That's a lot. I mean, this is kind of getting off on a tangent, but I always do look at, you see certain DJs or even just musicians, people who don't make dance music, who do tour with like the full crew, like family comes along, everything. I feel like a lot of older rock bands do that kind of thing. And it's cool in a way because it's kind of like you have this traveling caravan and you've just decided to live, this sort of nomadic life. And that's the whole lifestyle. But I do wonder, it's like, man, you would just never get any, like, I wonder how they focus on what they got to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think at some point, if it was to be the way you want to do it, because being away from your family is, as they grow, gets more and more extremely difficult. Like I've never felt that way towards missing something or someone, before in my life. So you kind of like start thinking, all right, is this really how I want to incorporate the two things I love, family and music. And I guess when they can actually do it in a way where they have a tour bus just to them and they're driving between these cities and then when they're at work and the kids and the, partners go and do their thing and then they're back from work at the end of the day, which is very late, but I guess you'd have to probably, and I'm imagining it, to do it in that almost 9 to 5 way, like treat it like that, even though the kids get an amazing life, which would be very different.
You're right. Yeah. It's different, but it is kind of, you're right. It's just a mental adjustment, like a perspective adjustment. Because if you did look at it that way, when you put it that way, it's not that different from what anyone else does.
No, I mean, that's it all. Then the big question is like, why am I here today? Why am I where I am today? Why am I doing this? It's like, okay, so what do I need to make me the most amazing person? And then it's like family, and then all the things you love doing. It all plays into the exact same thing, even though this career is highly different and also perceived to be even more different. I think there's a lot of similarities to what people can imagine as a normal job,
Yeah, that's right. You've kind of talked me into it at this point. Now I'm like, oh yeah.
I mean, that would be the dream for me too. Like I really enjoy traveling around. I really enjoy going from place to place. I enjoy being at airports sometimes because it's, it's that little bit of excitement. I enjoy landing somewhere. So if you could do it in a way that wasn't also taxing on, all the different parts of your life, to have them with you, that's the ideal.
Yeah,
dream, isn't it?
That's true, man. Yeah. How old are your kids? Is it one kid, 2 kids?
No, not 2 kids. So there's one is just turned 3, and one is 9, nearly 10, who I met when she was 3. And so me and my partner have been together for 7 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big age range too.
Yeah. It's 2 very different worlds, which is great and also sometimes difficult. I mean, my partner Naji, she's incredible and holds down the fort, while I'm off doing this. But the 2 of them, 2 girls. I love having girls. They're really a little bit more calm than boys, even they're really young. It seems like my friends have boys, but I love little dudes as well. They're so much fun to go and ride bikes and, build forts and stuff. So it's like these really cool worlds. Being big age gap actually makes it easier, I think, because we can get a lot of help from the older one and,
there's something about, I don't have kids, but a bunch of my friends have had kids in the last few years. So I've sort of gotten the residual conversations and knowledge from it. And there's something about like, if the kids are too close together in age, then they're always fighting. But if there's a big enough gap, then they can sort of take care of each other, something like that.
Yeah, and I think if the gap gets too big, then the other one's like, I don't want to hang out with you.
Well,
like a little baby.
9 and 3, that's a little different. But
yeah, no, it's worked out well, for what it is. We love it because, there's sometimes it's actually easier just letting them do two different things. One goes to a friend's house or, whatever. It's really cool for them to be around, having a parent in their life that's doing something creative too. I'm really stoked on that. Like, looking back on it as well, I had people around me that were creative when I was young, and I just thought they were amazing, just doing this thing that they love.
You talking about like you growing up, because you grew up in New Zealand as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You grew up around creative people. And I know just from researching a little bit that like you grew up kind of even like New Zealand is already a remote country, but you were kind of in a remote part of that country. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I grew up top of the South Island. I guess the closest town is called Motueka, and the closest city would be Nelson. Yeah, countryside. So when I was very, very young, my parents were still bouncing around a little bit, so I spent a little bit of time in Australia when I was like below 3, I think, maybe a year or so, in Sydney and Fremantle. And then went back to New Zealand and lived in the countryside. And from what I remember, had a great upbringing. And when I was pretty young, my parents were still, kind of the tail end of being punks, so crazy hair color when I was a kid and all that kind of stuff. And then that evolved into them knowing people who wanted to throw festivals. So that kind of got put on our land. So I kind of felt like I didn't live in the middle of nowhere. It felt like there was still lots going on around me. And being in such a beautiful place, it was a destination to go to, in the country as well. So people would visit.
Instead of you going to the city and the people kind of came to you.
Yeah, and I guess as a kid, that's what it felt like,
Right.
Which was awesome. And then being around the festival kind of, bands and musicians my entire life never made me feel anything but admiration for people who did that stuff. I was always like, wow, that's so cool, But never treated it as maybe going to be a profession if it fell into my lap. Or I just loved doing it my whole life as well. So I had imaginary show posters on my head, and like all these things of doing this thing that I do now. But yeah, growing up in a small town and, just doing my thing was kind of peaceful, I guess.
It's a really interesting balance to be in a beautiful place with not a lot of people around, but then to set the scene for anybody listening who isn't quite there yet. I mean, it's farmland, right? And you have a bunch of space, or your parents do, and they start, they weren't throwing the events themselves, right? It was more that they were allowing the events to happen on their property.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when I was really young, they'd have parties, and we had a old tobacco barn that got converted into a music studio.
Oh, wow.
Kind of before I was interested in it. When I kind of came into my young teenage years, the gear had been pulled out, but we had this basically perfectly soundproof barn on our property that I could have parties with my friends for, every weekend through my early teens when we were, first starting to party and in a really awesome, safe space, like that was a really cool thing too. We weren't out on the streets. We were like, we had an amazing opportunity to have that. And our parents were right there if, anything happened, and it was like, it was incredible.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Just out of curiosity, what do those parties look like? Like, what would you do at one of those?
We just I guess we'd kind of, as kids, we would like have a black light and tie some string up, and have a DJ set up. And I'd been to probably when I was 14, maybe 13, 14 kind of time. I went to some really big, I guess I'll bounce back, but like the festivals they were throwing were in the early 90s. Okay. And they were more band-based stuff, mini parties, and that evolved into some electronic music kind of coming through. And then around that time, there was some other parties starting, which evolved into, over the few years, they evolved into a party called The Gathering, which is very well known, late 90s, early 2000s festival in New Zealand on top of this mountain range at the top of the South Island. And people were coming from all over the world for that. And that was kind of my first show of that world.
Right.
In the late 90s, and I was so young, and it was just like huge sound systems, big lights, big sound, big music, trance, big old school trance, then just like blew my mind,
Yeah.
So I went to the local record store.
Sorry to cut you off, but I'm just curious, had you heard recordings of that kind of music before, or did you experience it live kind of?
I don't really know. I think so, but I think I might have been more into genres around that, but it was like this. I just remember standing in the middle of this huge stage and being like, "This music's fucking powerful." It was amazing just to hear electronic music like that. Growing up more around, I guess, bands and roots and dub. Some of it was electronic based, some of it not, and that was big and fat and drum and bass kind of elements too. That all kind of intertwined and just blew my mind and made me just want to have parties and play music and just feel that feeling again.
What did your parents do? Like, did they? I know you said they were kind of that punk lifestyle, but were they working like steady jobs, or was it kind of just bouncing around?
Yeah, no. We lived a good simple life, and my dad was. I can't remember what he did exactly at that time. My mum got a master's in educational psychology probably around that time, maybe when I was a little bit younger. And she was working in that field. And my dad was doing, I'm not sure exactly, maybe he was a beekeeper right then, which he did for quite a period, which was cool. I used to go out at night and help shift the hives and do things like that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
As my first kind of job, was awesome. I love bees. That was all around then. Yeah, and I guess I just kind of grew up around the culture and their friends, and really lucky to be in a part of the world that had those kind of level of parties.
Who was playing? Do you remember? Were there any big names or people who left an impression on you in those kind of like later 90s electronic events that were happening on the land?
So I guess as it went into the 2000s and crossed over, it was early days of a band called Salmonella Dub, which are really big here. Fat Freddy's Drop came about kind of around then, I think. Pretty sure just after those parties. The Gathering maybe kind of rings a bell. In terms of big names, didn't really matter at the time. I wasn't really following anything. And the music I was listening to, they were probably playing was maybe, New Zealand-based DJs playing these international songs, and I would go to the local record store in Nelson and buy CDs, and to have to play and just any album they had of trance or drum and bass or whatever. But there was a lot of names that I was following overseas, like Bad Company, drum and bass act or group.
Legends.
I would hear that music there, and totally. I'd hear that music at these parties, and it was just always prick my ear, like that sounds something like that. And I'd start to probably get more of a taste of what I actually liked within that, probably before I even knew it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to think about. We were talking about like your kids earlier, and just having kids as a musician and all that. I mean, I have to imagine so much development, like our brain development, happens in those early years. Like I have to imagine you were just absorbing so much of what was going on, from a young age, just seeing it around you. It's really interesting. I wonder like how that shaped you. I'm sure it just sort of normalized like this kind of lifestyle and making these kinds of creative choices, all that kind of thing. But it's just such a unique upbringing, it's interesting to think about.
At the time, I didn't really obviously know that, but as I grew and my friends would come stay and just comment on how lucky and awesome it was, and never really had a separation from parents to friends. They were always my friends, and something that I really cherish in those moments, and still to this day. And it's what I want to create with my children as well, to really, you should be their best friend or close to it, and that should be something where you encourage them, but also, expose them to things that you're into, that you've spent most of your life experiencing and finding the things that you really love about that, and then showing them that, and maybe they'll love it or not, but at least you've curated it somehow to being what you love, and that's kind of the best thing you can give them, especially if it creates some sort of creative outpouring. That's their own,
Right, and and I think to add on to that, sort of, if you see that spark in them, or a spark of interest in kind of anything in that world, then it's like seeing it, recognizing it, and then just nurturing that, whatever they're sort of naturally drawn to. Yeah, I think you're right. That's totally kind of the best thing you could possibly do.
Big thing, isn't it? Like, just, giving everyone their own, and they can take their own path if they're given many opportunities and many, directions, and it kind of, I've always felt that it doesn't really matter about your upbringing in terms of, what will happen later. If you have some of that innate creativity in you, you just need to be exposed to like-minded people or whatever. But if you are exposed to the freedom of it really young, it might happen earlier, it might be more enhanced. We're amazing beings.
Well, because I talked to a lot of people on this podcast, even, where I think early on, whether you're young in age or just a young artist, like just starting off, it's, especially at the start, it's so encouraging to just get one word of like, good job, or like, keep going, anything like that. And so many people don't get that for so long. And I think it can be very hard at the start when you don't have any tangible success yet. And if you don't have anyone telling you, keep going, push it, that's a hard thing.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it still makes such a big difference to someone like myself over a decade in, like those little words of encouragement from people, anyone, from someone who's just come to a show to someone who you've looked up to most of your life, it still matters so much. And it's powerful. I never really, in the early days of what I was doing, understood maybe what my words would give to someone. And as I've grown, I've just seen and remembered what that meant to me as well. And we should be encouraging of each other, because this is it. This is being creative and being out there and meeting people, and like, this is it. This is living.
Yeah, you're right, man. It is. And it's, it's obviously you and I agree on this, but, to me, it's like, it's kind of the best feeling, right? Like, I feel very lucky to be doing it, but sometimes it's easy to forget it unless you have that kind of, that really reinforcement. So, you grow up in this environment, all this craziness going on, obviously exposed to creativity and thinking in these ways early on. When did you start participating? Like, were you the DJ at these barn parties?
Yeah, I guess we all kind of just had goes and had some CDJs at some point. I think was someone my parents knew. I can't remember. I don't think I bought them. And the very, 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 very early on, first kind of things I did to do, to play, were, there was a beer festival when I was probably my mid-teens, that had heard that I played electronic music. So I played every CD that I had, all the favorite tracks of everyone, and played a set there. And then, my mum's birthday or things like that, we had parties. And then there were smaller festivals in the area that I would sort of go and play first at the on the stage, play again my favorite 15 songs that I had on CD.
Yep.
But the barn parties were kind of like they were more of a freedom for us as young teenagers, and making lifelong friendships, and just being, I guess, just like-minded people who just wanted to listen to that music and hang out in a really cool place that didn't feel like we had to go and wait till we could go clubbing, or hide it from our parents, or like all that kind of stuff.
Which I think that kind of thing is the most valuable and the most fun in a way. I mean, I think back to when I was that age with my friends, and just like almost the curation aspect of just like, you would get so excited about a song you had found that you loved, and just showing it to other people who also thought it was cool. Like, it really didn't have to be more than that. Like that was,
no, that's it.
In a way, it's weird because that was like the most fulfilling feeling. Like I could just show a song I liked to my friend and I was good. Like it takes a lot more than that these days, you know?
Yeah, no, it's the innocence of that moment. And that was what it was all about. It was just us hanging out in that environment, and feeling like, yeah, you just have loud music and we're going to piss anyone off. And yeah, I think that, yeah, like you said, that exact moment of going away for a few weeks and then gathering again and being like, oh, let's listen to these new 5 songs or whatever it was.
Right.
Yeah, it was amazing. And it kind of gave us we were still going to some festivals that were still popping up at that time. And just a really tight crew of people. Like, was very lucky, very lucky.
Did it feel like a fringe interest still? Because I mean, 90s, like electronic music for me, I grew up in Minneapolis in the 90s, and electronic music was absolutely a thing, but it still was underground more or less,
Yeah, I'd say this is more like, when would this have been? Yeah, late 90s, early 2000s. I left high school when I left high school in like 2002, so it was pre that. Honestly, I probably didn't even think whether it was fringe or it was popular or whatever it was. It was like, I really feel for people who maybe struggle to discover what makes them feel amazing, and this was like the thing that made us feel, well, especially myself, the most amazing. We'd found that thing already. Yeah, it was just like a natural, innate thing.
Yeah, no, that's even better. It didn't matter. Yeah, that's even better.
It didn't matter, not at all. And then, even in culture, like, it felt like where I was from, festivals were this big thing, but probably the rest of the place didn't really have as much. We lived in a perfect climate to have them in summer, and it wasn't too hot. Although one of the big gathering festivals had torrential rain and people got hypothermia, it was carnage.
Oh, no.
But like it felt. I hadn't really thought about this, but it just felt kind of normal.
Was there a point, and I assume too, I'm sure you're playing some instruments along the way, just having fun, being kids. Was there a point where it started to feel more serious, or where you became aware of sort of the larger like context, the industry of it, the fact that it could be a career, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I used to, before I made the music or before I played shows, I would put myself to sleep imagining, living somewhere overseas in these big cities and picking my close friends or family up from the airport and going and play a show, that they'd fly on over to come see me do, which now, I've done that multiple times, which is this like full childhood dream. Or I'd imagine these songs and make them build up and drop in my head while I was falling asleep. And that was at high school.
Oh, wow.
That just felt like, I didn't really think that was a thing. Just felt like some normal thing that I did. And, I moved to a couple of different cities in New Zealand after I left school and was playing, just DJing with my friends in their houses, entered a DJ competition for a drum and bass one in Wellington and won that. So I got some shows out of that in New Zealand. And maybe 6 months later or a year later, I moved to Melbourne in Australia. Still love doing it, played a few sets around the town and, more bars, and didn't really still want it to be anything more than just something I loved. I almost didn't want it corrupted by having to make money through it or feeling like there was the pressure of it being a career. So I kind of left it at that.
Oh, that's so. Did you know that at the time? Like that was a thought in your head to not corrupt
Yeah, absolutely. I was always, I guess, it was like this, it's an overused word so often, but the manifestation of it was just telling people this is just a hobby and I'll do design work as my profession. And I'd studied for 6 months, got a great job doing design and a landscape architecture firm for my auntie in Wellington, and that kind of just kept me able to just go to work, enjoy what I did there, and the music was just pure hobby, and I loved keeping it separate. Maybe to not put the pressure on myself for it to have to be anymore, subconsciously, I'm not sure. But I was really happy with it being that. But it wasn't until I kind of had gathered enough interesting music for myself that wasn't genre specific. Until like 2009, I released an EP of 4 tracks. And, at the time, forums were kind of, the way that it seemed like you put it on the forum and people download it, they'll start chatter and promoters would see that. And it kind of was more of a way that it was discovered, I guess, and still had no idea how far it would go or what was going on. We just loved doing it. But it kind of started some sort of, I guess, chatter in the world of bass music or whatever. Started to play a few more festivals. Still kind of maybe tricking myself that was what it was going to be. But I think deep down the dream was to do it like this, and to be able to do what I absolutely loved through and through from day dot. And, I guess that zero pressure on myself for I've got to get to this point, and if I don't, I'm going to fail. I just enjoyed every part of that ride early on until it did truly become what it is, which is still mind-blowing.
It makes me wonder too, earlier you said that you still enjoy, traveling somewhere and landing in a place and, talking about the idea of, not corrupting this pure enjoyment of the thing, which I mean, obviously at this point, I think it's safe to say, you're fully corrupted.
I'm corrupt.
Well, the question, I guess, is how have you been able to kind of keep that enjoyment, even for little things like landing somewhere on a plane, which, I think at this point, I'm sure as many as I do, people who just are so over the travel aspects and all the tiring parts. Is there any part of it, like anything you've learned to kind of keep yourself in that like fun, excited place?
I mean, you mean more recently or more early on?
Kind of both. The fact that you're still excited about it is impressive to me. But I think also early on, dealing with all the stresses of it becoming, what you rely on financially and all that can also be hard in its own way.
Yeah, I mean, going all the way back to sort of releasing my first album in 2010, it's a weird thing because I guess now having social media being a huge driving force behind how you get it out there, how then you measure yourself on what's out there, how you then build towards certain goals via a social media, I guess, driven plan and it makes complete sense, and it's we're all aboard. But I guess then it was like putting it out, having people. I can't even remember whether it was MySpace at the time or whatever it was. It was more about you play a set at a festival, and people would come up to you at the end of the set and be like, "Holy shit!" Like I didn't know you existed.
Right.
What was that? And like all those kind of things would happen, and that's what kind of kept you going for going somewhere because you didn't really know what was going to happen when you got there. Instead of it being you go and then you're receiving this praise or not, kind of in a digital world, and it was like this tangible physical thing. So that that excitement of being there, and I really growing up around festivals, I absolutely love them. I love that place and that experience that you all have together.
And there's like mystery to it too, right?
Absolutely.
Like I never thought about that idea that in the age of social media, there's none of that mystery anymore, because not only do you as the performer kind of have some idea of what you're in for when you get there, but also obviously the crowds have a pretty good idea of what you do because, you're out there on social media well in advance and they can kind of check it out anytime. I never thought about that. You're right. Yeah. It's like,
I didn't either until right then. It's like, to be questioned about it, why, and it really probably sticks in my mind is that was just such an exciting thing in the back of the ride to the party in the middle of nowhere. You were like, you had no idea, and you got there and you got to see the stages, and then you got to see the people you knew, you got to play, you got to meet new people, and that still exists completely. But that was a big thing. And today, probably that little old me doesn't, will never go away. That yes, I get tired, and yes, I miss my family, and there are times where I'm like, what am I doing here? But there's a glorious part of that world that you probably never lose. I hope I never lose. I really don't want to burn out on that and not enjoy it, because that's the essence. And then you take that away and you make music and you use all of that and that memory, and then you imagine it for next year, and it's a constant give and take. in every direction.
Yeah, well, that actually, I was about to ask you, and you just made me think of, for you, are you the kind of person, are you always writing music, or do you kind of go in seasons, like write for a project, finish it up, get it out there, go on tour and, take some time off from writing, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I do believe in if you can do it. Early on, I was writing every 5 seconds, and that's all I did. I had no family, no partner, no anything else in my life. That I was just purely dedicated to that. I'd borrowed some money from my parents. I think it was like $9,000 early on. They got me through the year, not having to work so much. Paid that back with money I'd made from music. That was a great feeling.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I think now it's like you are much more project based. I am, where I'll, take on a big show or I'll take on a record. Records are really insane and stressful to go through the full process. Like, it's part of it, I guess. You have to love and hate it and do that. But I think when I'm on the road, I'm much more focused on the show. And if I'm trying to create as I'm there, instead I'm normally, now I'm controlling the video and making a lot of the video now. And most of the show is built around something I've programmed, and we're doing, the lasers and part of the lighting on stage, and it's all coming from me. So when I'm touring, I'm like trying to figure out ways to make that better. And depending on the scale of the show will depend on how involved that is.
Right.
Because I do believe that when you go to a show, there's both elements of people want to hear brand new music, which by the time I'm touring it, I have a whole set of it, and that becomes the way to test it and a way to package it. And then you're touring the album. And then, by the time I've finished the album touring thing, I've already written another half an album, or often a lot more. So I don't try and stress myself if I can help it with being like, okay, I'm about to play these shows. Shit, I've got no brand new music for this specific show. And realistically, there are people that come and all they want to hear is stuff they've never heard. There's always going to be some of that in the set. But to me, a lot of the time, that music will feel completely different in a different atmosphere or in a different presentation. And if you can control that too on the road, then when you do have that time to sit, for me, writing in the studio is very important. You get that moment afterwards to take everything you saw and learn from that last run. And then, I can write a lot faster once I'm out of that world.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And for, anyone listening or watching this who hasn't seen you live, I think it's worth saying that, your live show, I mean, not only have you've performed with full bands and you brought a huge orchestra to Red Rocks and, these kind of big elaborate things, but even when it's just you as a solo performer, I mean, it's a pretty intricate performance as compared to kind of a regular DJ set. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, at the moment I'm touring without some of my elements because I'm trying to focus on doing the video stuff live. And I learned and taught myself a bunch of that over COVID. And, that now I've got that on lock. I'm going to reincorporate all the drum machines again. And then, the synthesizers and the show starting next week in Australia. And yeah, I think that's also a part of it where I need to stay having fun and looking forward to going out there again. If I spend the last 10 years doing the exact same method of performance, I wouldn't be that excited to get on a plane personally, I also feel like this is just this for however long it is. It could be for your entire adult life and you could retire in your 60s, from this world, or it's a short period of time. And, fortunately for me, I've been doing it for more than a decade. And I think I always want to look back on it and go, I'm fucking proud of that. I've done all these things that I really enjoyed for myself as much as I want these people to experience something either new or truly like try and expand their mind, what they accept or expect as well.
Yeah.
Personally, no pressure on anyone else. This is just something that I enjoy. And I actually love the pre-show thing where you work your ass off late at night trying to program these things. And I feel like I'm just getting through life in that way.
Yeah, well, I think that it's got to help in a lot of different ways because I relate to what you're saying as far as like this is a limited time thing. We're all lucky to be doing it in any capacity, and so there's definitely that internal pressure of like whatever level you're on, however long you have it, you might as well make the most of it, right? Like there's kind of...
I mean, I was sorry to interrupt you. I
No.
just, on that point of the timeline, I did see someone years ago, and part of the conversation was about being scared of putting the ball down, and
Sure.
that part of the thing is what probably most creatives have, because we're so driven in the moment, and want to keep that thing going. And it's okay to sometimes have a little bit of perspective and see that for that moment. And often that carries you so much further, and there's no desire or wish to end it at all. But to know that it is finite probably makes you go a lot longer as well. To know that there is a limit to it and not think, I'm in it, I can do whatever I want, I can be whoever I want, all those things. To know that there is a limit, the appreciation is bigger, and probably the length of your career is as long as you want it a lot of that time.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's a good clarification, because, I'm certainly not suggesting that, everyone just needs to push themselves to the limit every minute of the day. But what you're saying is more accurate, where it's, just every day be grateful for whatever you're up to, that you're in the position you're in, and again, on any level. It's not just people who are hugely successful. I think anyone doing this, it's just a fun thing to do. Like, as long as you can find the enjoyment of it, I think you're right that kind of mindset probably enables you to do it for longer and enjoy it for longer. You know what I mean?
And take it extremely seriously, just enough so you can have some fun.
That's perfect. That's the perfect way to put it.
For a long time there was zero meaning from me behind any of it. Like, it was like, here's this thing, blah, take what you want. It's yours now. Go for it. And then I kind of evolved things that I did want to say, or I did want to have meaning, but I was cautious to not tell someone this is what it means, because for me, it could be that moment in time that changes my day or life or whatever, and that can do the same for them. But I don't want to be telling them that's what it's for. It's theirs to take and run with it. And that also, I think, gives longevity to music and to art, because you're not constricted by the climate of today, whatever that means. It's yours forever, and you can pick it up whenever you want. And I think creatively that should be how you feel, if you can, as well.
Absolutely.
Ideally.
No, I think you're right. And I think, it's a good note for any creatives to not try to control the perception of your projects too much. Like, obviously you want to, hone in on what it means to you and make sure that whatever you put out is valuable to you. But you're right. I mean, you don't even know how something you do could be received 20 years from now in a totally different climate. Maybe it has meaning you haven't even thought of, all of that, which kind of leads me to ask you about the new album, Shape of Sound. For you, I mean, you said earlier, like, you would kind of just make music without thinking about the meaning of it, or without thinking about assigning too much value to one thing or another. At this point in your career, the new album, did it come around? Did it coalesce around a concept? Does it have a particular meaning for you? Like, I guess the question is, how is this album different from projects you've worked on in the past?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question in terms of how I probably perceive what I do myself. In the past, it has been probably the one thing I did want people to gain from what I was doing was an escape, an escape from all the bullshit of today in their life. And music can be such a beautiful place. It can make you dance. It can make you be free physically and emotionally, and it can really help you through things in your life. And it has done that for me from the artists I've listened to. It's a weird thing, because there's an evolution that you want to have as an artist, and there's also a part of art that will never be able to be something completely different, because it's meant to be you. It's meant to always be from you. And that was something that for me, I've learned that if I'm questioning things a little bit and being like, shit, okay, is this going to work? Is this, that means I'm pushing myself, for one. It also means that I care. And so that it has part of me in it. There isn't, this is going to work, I'm going to put that out, it's just going to go do great. So even when I put the album out, I was still unsure how it would be received, and in a lot of ways. And so that's exciting and also nerve-wracking. But I think as an album, it's probably a shape of sound. I guess it's born from, it's moving particles of air. We can almost see it when we imagine it. People see color, synesthesia. It's sort of built around that. I'm half deaf and so I'm deaf in one side basically. So for me, a lot of the time I'd know a song was complete by closing my eyes and I start seeing all shapes because I guess I'm not concentrating on one sense, on another sense is coming about. And in terms of music, it's a funny one. I guess when I write music, it is just like it pours out. And this probably is different in terms of is me today,
Sure.
And me evolved as I am as a human, have children, have a whole nother world from where I was back then. And there could be elements of it that I feel are more mature, or these things just in the music for myself, and learned new skills along the way, worked with orchestras, like I said, and bands. And at the time, there's part of it where your trajectory or your journey as an artist should actually, for myself, be able to be heard through there without me telling you. There's no, that's the other part of it. Like, there's no, I'm not going to tell you this is what this album means to me, because it does mean so much to me. There's music on there that I wrote for family members before they passed, and there's music on there that I wrote so inspired from moments with my family, and then moments with people around the world playing music. And over the decade of doing it, just that joy and love in it. But I think listening to someone's discography over the years, you should probably be able to pick your own journey and reasoning.
Absolutely.
As deep as that is.
No.
Probably the truth. I've never really.
I love talking about it in this way, man. This is very much my shit. And it's funny you say that, because I had written down both. I was taking some notes while I was listening to the album earlier today, and I wrote down mature, or like maturing, because it did feel like that to me. And I also, when you mentioned like family members passing and all that, it's some of it to me, there was like almost a more melancholy emotion in some of the tracks than I had heard in some of your previous work. Because I think the album followed a really interesting arc. Because obviously, there's happier moments, sadder moments, more energetic moments, more calm moments, all of that you want in a full album arc. But by the time you got to the end, like the last song, Take Flight, to me felt very triumphant almost, or hopeful, something like that. And again, this is just my experience, what it meant to me while I was listening. But yeah, I kind of felt like I went through something with you, with the person behind the music, where it was like, yeah, you got through something, and then by the end, you sort of see the hope on the horizon, or you're able to look at it in a different way.
You've given me shivers.
It's good, man. Same goes for you, man. The feeling's mutual, because I think I listen to plenty of music, and you don't always get that arc. So I guess I'm always, I guess the question, if there is one, is, how much of that is intentional versus instinctual when you're putting together an album?
I would say if you can purely make it instinctual, then you're probably going to convey something much more magical.
Yeah.
Whereas if the intention at the time, it's weird, because the intention in any moment when you're being creative is only reflective of what you're experiencing right then as well. Your intention can be pure, but it's not corrupted. It's influenced by what you're going through,
Yeah.
And then it's only when you can actually stand back and have no more control over it, because it's yours to listen to now and everyone else's, then it can kind of display itself for what it is. And that's amazing that you feel that way about it, because just you hearing you talk about it is kind of making me go, fuck, that's actually probably maybe where I was going with it, unintentionally.
Right.
Because I don't, there's so many words out there that are used as a way of explaining someone's creative process or reasoning behind things. And I think a lot of the time it's the lack of words that can actually be the truth behind it, because I don't really know at that specific moment what my intention was. I was just feeling something, and the packaging of it was very intentional in terms of creating a flow and creating a journey. And I had some close friends. I bounced many different track listings and songs and off them, and a couple of the songs, Dopamine with my partner Naji, was one of the last songs I wrote, and I wrote it and played it in a set. Thought this album was done. I was like, fuck, this goes off. This is awesome. This is a break from any
right.
internal reality. I just love this shit. This is what it's about. Just having a good time. And I was like, that's going to go on the album. Like let's go. It's so yeah. I love the fact that music and art and everything is subjective, because it should be yours to decide what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how does it feel now that the album's out? You talked about it's this giant process to make it, to put it out, to get it ready, to sequence the tracks, all of that, mix, master. There's so many steps, plenty of stress. Is it a relief to get it out, or is it kind of just on to the next stress?
No, honestly, this album has felt the best out of any album I've ever put out, except for the ones where the very early on ones where I put them out and there was zero expectation. Well, zero pressure, I guess, actually, of what is this thing. And, I've had people reach out that I didn't expect to reach out and tell me they really loved it and they enjoyed it. And, you can't ever expect compliments from afar all the time or even close by. It just has to be what it is. Yeah, the last week it's been incredible, because I feel so proud of it. But sometimes when you launch something and it doesn't do what you think, you can lose some of that pride, because you would question, is this the right thing? And that sucks, because it's amazing. You put all your soul into this thing and you've done a great job, and it's yours, and it should be yours to be proud of. But then the need for praise is innately built into most creative humans. So to walk away from it and let it be and see people reacting to it in the way they are. I'm very proud and happy, and it's been a great process.
That's good, man. Yeah. And it's interesting because earlier, we were talking about how those little words of encouragement go a long ways, and that you kind of, you need it at any stage of the career, that kind of thing. But it also, then I think if you open yourself up to that praise, you kind of by definition also open yourself up to that criticism, the people who don't like it, that kind of thing. How are you with that as far as taking in, people who don't like it?
I think there's a difference between someone telling you they don't like it and then someone telling you why this is not what they like today, sure. And that's as far as it probably can go, because maybe 5 years ago it would have blown their mind. Maybe in 5 years, if they'd never heard it today, it would be something that would change their life. You don't really know. And when you create something, there's so many people out there it's not made for, and essentially it's made for you and maybe the people around you or the people that have been with you or, your fans or things like that. You can tangibly think about as you are creating what you're doing. And yes, if someone says something terribly horrible, it does hurt, but you have to be slightly, removed from it as well to understand. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that get a lot of hate for no reason. And, I feel for them and like, it's terrible. Because, no one deserves that. It's like, sure, if you don't like this thing, don't listen to it. That's fine. It's totally fine. If you open yourself up to getting a big magazine to review your album, well, then you've got to take that for what it is. And, good or bad. And then that's also just a subjective opinion of someone. You also learn to be very careful, I think, as someone being creative is if you are going to offer some feedback or someone really demands feedback from you and you can be honest, well, then you can be more honest. But if it's just to go out there and tell someone you hate what they did, I mean, that's not forwarding us as a humanity and like creativity and things like that. That's normally sometimes born from other,
it's
reasonings in their own life.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like this funny thing. So I think when it, you like you said, you have to be prepared for the good and the bad, and that's fine. That's just part of this. And as long as you have had some level of understanding of what it is and where it's going and what it does for you as a person, then it's it's part of life. People tell you they don't like your shoes and shit like that, and you've got to move on.
That's right. That's right. Well, just because you mentioned it, and I find this kind of fascinating. You mentioned that you're mostly deaf in 1 ear, and for somebody who does what you do, I mean, that's again a very unique position. Just if you don't mind talking about it, I'm curious, like, has it always been that way, or did that sort of come about while you were already in the middle of this career?
No, it came about before this was anything. I guess there's a part of me that thinks maybe it helped, as kind of fucked up as that is, and as terrifying as that outcome is for most people who have hearing in both sides. It may have helped me be more driven to push it, while I could, and not knowing if that was something that was going to be forever, or maybe there's, a way to lose both, and that's it. That's the small moment you get.
Wow. Yeah.
So in 2007 was when I had the first major surgery to remove a cyst from behind my eardrum.
Okay.
They basically open your ear off and drill through your skull, go behind your eardrum, pull the cyst out.
Man.
And it's caused by the station. You want to know the whole thing?
Yeah, let's go.
There's a station tube that goes to the back of your throat, and it goes into behind your eardrum. There's a cavity there where your middle ear is, and the station tube was blocked, so the air behind the eardrum gets absorbed by the skin, slowly sucking in your eardrum. When that touches the cavity wall, it grows a benign cyst. Much less common these days. Maybe more common in third world situations where the medical world is a little bit behind some of the first world situations. So like kids don't suffer from it so much now, but I guess it never got diagnosed properly when I was younger. So it either got blocked over time, or I was born with less of a gap in the station tube, and they can stick a thing in there now and open it up. So it's,
so
can function properly.
Was it like, did it manifest as basically like pain in the area?
I had like a lot of these grommets through my eardrum as a younger kid to release the pressure. It was either getting sucked in, or I'd have lots of infection. And then, I guess I felt like maybe I had a 5-year period before there where I sort of was told that it was fine. And I just moved to Australia, and was just starting to feel a bit heavy on the side of my face and a little bit more deaf. That's basically the feeling, because there's a face nerve that goes through there that it was starting to push on. So I was starting to feel a bit like off. So I went to a specialist after going to a doctor, and he was like, we need to operate now, in the next little bit. So I don't even know how long that period was, maybe a month. Came home from that appointment just devastated, bawling. Just basically they have to tell you the extent of the extreme outcome, which is droopy face, deaf, and it can grow into your brain and kill you. So that's why they had to get it out really quick. And the operation was huge. It was like 7 or 8 hours. My parents had come over for it, and they were terrified because I way longer than it should have been. Came out of there, had to learn how to, have my balance over like a 2-week period, because I'd just been pumped full of so much stuff. And they'd been, super invasive in that area. Developed extreme ringing in my ears from probably, I put it down to the drugs that I would have had to have. And also, playing around in that part of your head. I spent 6 months having to listen to white noise at night to be able to get rid of the ringing. It was full on.
And after that,
making music.
Sorry, not to cut you off, but just because I'm super curious, was it the kind of thing where you came back around after the surgery, and immediately like there was the ringing and the like extreme like loss of hearing as well? Was it kind of just like a light switch kind of thing?
Well, I mean, my hearing had been going for quite a period of time. Okay. So I don't know if the hearing was better or worse. It's probably a lot worse after the operation, just knowing that they had to move everything around. But being so, I guess, sensitive to it already, it was like, the ringing was the thing that I remember the most in that period. But what kind of would get me through was making music, because I could have it up loud and I could focus on something, and I was not thinking about that ringing.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So it didn't necessarily stop my creativity. It potentially made it, more driven, because I had to escape that fucking intense sound, and I've still got, all it is now is I've learned how to block it out,
Oh yeah, it's still there.
Intentionally, definitely. I can hear it in any second of the day, 1,000 different levels of frequency,
Wow.
it's pretty full on, but it's also just, I know there's a lot of people out there that have it. I've had actually quite a few people over the years who have discovered that I've had it and had big ringing hit me up privately, and I've had chats with them about how to, not give up on that dream of doing it, because, do you want to spend the rest of your life doing something you're not that into, or just give it a good go while you've got it,
Yeah.
that's life, right? But yeah, I've had probably another 4 or 5 operations since then.
Oh, wow.
And the last major one, I think, was in 2014, I think, where they actually had to move my eardrum, open it up. So I can't go swimming because I've got no block between the middle ear and the the outside. They moved it, and now it just opens into a bowl. And that's where you're only hearing your balance tubes are, which if they get too hot or cold from your body temperature, the ears go and you just drown.
Wow.
Or you get dirty water in there and it gets infected. And it hasn't been infected since then. So yeah, it's been a big process, and now it's very aware of it because I put in ears in and I can't hear on one side, but I just get used to it, and that's why I probably also don't like riding on the road, because it's headphone based. Even though I can really listen to music on headphones and pick up, what I like and don't like about a mix or things like that. It's not something I'm driven towards. When I sit in a room, I can just move my body a little bit and I can get more of a balance.
Yeah, I was wondering, I was going to ask you, production wise too. I mean, I'm sure you've had to devise kind of your own personalized system for all of that, for mixing and engineering and everything. I mean, I'm sure, like you said, I'm sure it probably does make what you do sound more unique, just because probably.
Well, I'm mixing in mono.
Oh, okay. Do you mix everything in mono?
No, I essentially am.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, right. You're hearing in mono. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hearing in mono. Sorry. Yeah. Who knows whether that's helped? It's interesting. I only reference my own stuff mostly now. I've guess built a thing where people, when I first released those first bunches of music, I just picked a range that I was going for, and I did that, and it turned out to work great. I had no idea.
Right.
Most of the stuff I do, I had no idea the orchestra was going to work. I had no idea the band was going to work. I always did everything without going too far into what other people had done, and just trying to figure out a way that's more me, or more, I understand it easier, so I can be the one who sits there and does a lot of it. Same with mixing and mastering and all those kind of things. It feels good sometimes, when it feels right? You're sitting in a room,
yeah.
That feels good. That sits really nice. And you've got to trust it and then take it to another room and make sure it's correct. But if it feels right, I don't look at any meters or levels, because that can corrupt you as well. You're like, oh, sounds great. You look at the thing, oh shit, the kick's too loud. It's like, well, is it? Really?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I mean, you've also, what music that you love sounds like to you, right?
Totally.
So
there's definitely been artists I've followed, and Noisia, for example, who just had did have their last show on the weekend.
Yeah, REPRODUCTIVE, man.
Yeah, over the years, sometimes you just listen to that and just be like, what the fuck, this is insane.
Yeah.
And take what you like from it. That's the other thing. There's a lot of people out there that want to sound like someone because they love it, and that's awesome. But often inside of that, there's things that you probably wouldn't have done, and that doesn't mean it's good or bad or right or wrong. It's it's more you.
Yeah. Well, it makes me wonder too. This is another question I was going to ask you is, I think your entire career, you've been next to impossible to pin down as far as, what genre is it? What style is it? That kind of thing. You've always, you've made music that just sounds like you, music that's, pretty wide ranging. But to get to that point, I'm always curious for someone in your position, when you were starting off making music, did you have a vision for it? Or were you looking at someone inspiring you saying, I want to make music like that? Or was it less thought out and just kind of you were making whatever you thought sounded cool?
It would probably go back to the days of those early festivals where I was listening to huge trance music, big bass, drum and bass, dub stuff, hardcore, fast, trancey stuff, deep house. It all existed around that time in its own way. And this was really cool about this festival, The Gathering. They had a trance stage, a drum bass kind of live stage, a hard house stage, a house stage. And you go in there and you get your fix of that stuff at any time through party. And then when I left those, I would just be really inspired by things I dug, about each one. And there was never really an artist so much that I would want to sound like, but I would go, oh, this song is sick, and I love where the bass sits or the drum sits or the intensity of it or whatever, and just try and make it in my own way. And that kind of early music was very much big bass, dirty bass sounds, slow hip hop beats, dub kind of beats, and trancey leads and stabs and chords. And it was exactly where it came from. It was all those genres that I liked. Probably, I didn't really know how it was going to go down. I used to play these like breakbeat sets in the mid 2000s in Melbourne, and I would start my set with like one of these slow 100 BPM songs, and just to see how it would go.
Right.
And normally went off the most, like people were like lost their shit, and it was like I was still really unsure. And then I guess as it went along, like artists that you just dig something about it. It'd be the groove, it would be the lead, it would be whatever it was. And often I'd go, okay, cool, I've got this in my mind, and I'll just go sit in front of it and probably try and make a sound like that straight away. But by the time I got to the point of having a song, nothing like that.
Right.
I just was very inspired by that particular thing. Noisy, like I said, that gave me plenty of those moments where it was like ridiculous sounds.
Oh, yeah.
And then you'd go and sit in there, and then I'd end up with something that was nowhere near as dirty or fast or hard or whatever, but it had come from that moment.
Yeah, I give that advice a lot if anyone ever asks, is, that's a great way to learn in general, is take something that blows your mind and just sit down and try to make it at whatever skill level you're at right now, because you probably won't get there, but in that process, you'll get somewhere interesting, you'll learn something, and you'll probably have, if you look at what you make, you can kind of tell maybe something about yourself or something about your tendencies as a creative, Yeah,
and what you end up with, like, it should always be magic, because you've tried to reinterpret that thing, and instead of ever being like, it doesn't sound anything like it, and you're still listening back and forwards, and you're like, well, you're not going to get it. You're not, however long I've been doing it, or, that day, wherever you got to is exactly where you're at, for that moment. And that's awesome. And
it makes
then you can only get better as
that's
well.
Right.
So like the next time you try it, you can different thing, and you have to go through that process. And I would spend forever in the studio, and I don't even know where I got to. And I'll probably finish a song every 6 months or 4 months, or, then it went down and down and down. And by that point, you're doing things and maybe still questioning it and being like, fuck, is it going to work? And play it out. And someone goes, oh, like the crowd works, and you suddenly gain more appreciation for it. And then you start to figure out, okay, this is what I think it should sound like. And this is my level of what it is,
Yeah, it makes me think too that you're kind of finding new ways over and over to put yourself back in that position too. Like I think about, we mentioned briefly when you brought the orchestra to Red Rocks and did that performance, that almost seems like kind of the same thing where, you have this inspiration of like, let's make orchestral arrangements of my music. That sounds cool in my head. But then I'm sure in the process of doing it, I have to imagine it didn't work exactly the way you thought it would work, or the results were different than how you had originally envisioned them. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I worked with that project, on that project with an amazing human, Tom Hageman, who, brought so many of my ideas to life, my little synth adaptations of things, and he'd really take it and bounce ideas backwards and forwards. And honestly, like walking on stage, even the moment, I'll never forget, I was standing with one of my managers on the side. I remember looking at him being like, he gave me a hug, and I just walked on stage, and I had zero idea how it's going to work. I had no idea if it was going to be a thing or not. And maybe that was part of the magic in it too, because I don't think anyone else did either, and coming off and having that, absolute 6 months of intense work on something, and then walking off and then having nothing too. That was an interesting experience, like being on the side of the green room, and everyone was enjoying it, and then going to after party and then waking up the next day and being like, fuck, what next?
Right.
Like here's the thing. And like realizing this, whatever you work on or whatever project you're doing or whatever new version of it is, that's never going to be it. You're always going to be like better, or you're going to do something different again, or like, that's part of the ride. I mean, talking about it now makes me feel really inspired, to remember
That's
that.
beautiful. I mean, it makes me think about, that's almost like a Buddhist idea. It makes me think of like
Yeah.
like a Japanese sand garden kind of thing, you know, where
It really
you make
is,
all of
yeah.
these intricate designs and then one day you just go and just shovel it away and it's blank again, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it lasts forever, but it also doesn't, you know, and in a way for the person or for yourself, you know, it's the beauty of art. It lasts forever in the ether, and
Right.
it does things for people and animals and everything on the planet in its own way. You could never possibly know. Yeah, it's magic.
And I feel like this is a good way to kind of bring this whole thing home, because it kind of seems like you have this really good outlook on what you do, where obviously you care a lot about it and obviously you work really hard and you're very focused on it. But then you also seem to at the same time have this sort of understanding that, yeah, it's a temporary thing. It's, you know, in some ways what we do, like I always talk about that I couldn't be more passionate about what I do, but I also think what I do is kind of silly, you know, like it's like an absurd thing at the same time. And I like you know, it's that silly, serious thing again. And for you, I guess the question here is like this attitude that you have towards your work, the gratitude for it, but still the obsession and the focus on it. Have you always been that way, or is this something you've kind of come to over time?
I think I've been that way for a long time. Like I was always everything I picked up and wanted to do my best at. But I always understood, like, you know, I used to play soccer in the small town I lived in. We lost nearly every game. But I still went back and gave it my all, you know, and in high school, I played drums as a musical instrument and got the music prize one year, and then didn't really want to continue because I couldn't see how it would evolve, and I probably wasn't able to take it to another level. So I stopped doing that. Yeah, I guess in life, that's part of who I am. I'm very, very perfectionist and driven, and I'll do this thing that I love for absolutely as long as I can while I enjoy it and while I see it as a beautiful thing, you know. But yeah, I don't really know. I think I'm just who I am.
Yeah, no, that's probably a good thing, man. I think that's a good sign if you don't totally know the answer. I think that means you're on the right track.
Yeah, I guess, and that thing about being, you know, like you said, it's a beautiful moment to be, and for yourself too, you know, be in that line of like, this is ridiculous, you know, let's just make it epic. And then, no, I take this very seriously and I want to do it well, you know, and push myself and get better and all that kind of stuff without the leaning too hard to one side where it's stressful because you haven't got what you think you need to. Well, there's no line, you know, this is just a ride. It's a great ride. And every part of it that enhances your life, you should be able to give back that thing too and be like, hey, you've made my life incredible. I want to make your life incredible.
That's kind of a great way to ask for you. I mean, obviously you're back on the road. You mentioned that, you know, you've been going hard with the visuals for this tour, and now you're starting to bring in some other of the live performance aspects. Is there anything you are currently working on outside of the live show? Anything else you're excited about? Any short or long-term goals? Anything else you want to get out there before we wrap this up?
I mean, yeah, there's a few things I'm working on that I definitely cannot say, and I'm not doing it in some weird hype way. There's something that I'm working on, and you know, that keeps me entertained, I guess, as well. You know, I'm probably always working on stuff that I don't really share, and some of it comes to light and some of it doesn't. And that's kind of half for yourself too. You know, it's like a weird pushing the boundaries and throwing a million ideas out there and seeing what feels good and what sticks. And no, I just want to balance the world of friendship and family and you know, wife and kids and touring and also trying to be influential and encouraging to people who just see it. They don't need me to tell them how to do things. You know, they see maybe as an example. And so I want to build what I do around that, you know, as well. I can't wait to make more music. It's like I'm hanging right now. It's been a lot of touring and got a million ideas. I've got lots of sketches. I've got things where I just need to go into a room and flesh them out and make them big. And I like to leave it as an unknown after you release something, because you don't know what you're going to get from that last thing. I do have a lot of music written, and I have a bunch of EPs kind of done, but I want to feel how this feels and then dive back in there and see where that goes.
Well, this has been great, man. I really enjoyed talking to you. I have one last question that I ask at the end of each one of these episodes. Before I ask it, is there anything else that's on your mind? Anything else you want to get out there?
No, you've made me think about things I haven't thought about for a long time. It's been awesome.
Oh, that's great, man. Yeah, no, and this is, again, feeling is mutual. Not all of these episodes are this fun. So the last question, this is just a quick kind of like first thing that pops into your head kind of question. Just looking for a memory from your life, a moment from your life. Could be from any time when you were a kid, yesterday, anytime, when in that moment, in that memory, music really hit you hard, really had a deep impact on you in that moment. And that could be something like maybe it was the unintentional soundtrack for a meaningful moment, or maybe just, you were in a good mood and the right song played. It's meant to be a very broad question, and it's kind of no wrong answer. It's just the first thing that pops into your head.
I mean, honestly, I'm going to give you a little bit of a longer answer. I feel like my life, and this is just, I have no idea why I was given this opportunity, has had a million of those. I really, truly do. I feel like I constantly still do, and maybe that's because I'm listening for it or something in my own life. But when you said it, I was trying to think through, I was like, just a million of them went through my head. It really did. And I can remember them all.
Right.
But just, I was very fortunate. I feel very fortunate to grow up in a place and be surrounded by all the things that were with me from, a faintest memory of ever of, and having the story told of being 2 years old and playing on the lap of my parents' friend on the drums and loving that, to my uncle building me a drum kit out of honey pots, to being given the first version of Reason to make music with from my parents' friend, and just feeling music coming out that he was like, well, I could do it myself, and listening to Tracy Chapman with my headphones on in the lounge, things that just, it's like a bazillion that would probably lead to today. But yeah, what a nice thought.
That's a great answer, actually, because I think that to me just tells me that you kind of just look at your whole life that way. And I think as somebody who creates stuff, I have to imagine that probably allows you to sort of just tune into that frequency much easier to contextualize what you're doing when you're writing something too, is just if you can immediately recall all these moments when music meant something to you in a big or small way, I have to imagine just subconsciously in the back of your head, that kind of comes into play when you're writing too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. It should be all subconscious at some point, like you should just be in the flow. And, when you create, it's like those moments where you step back and you're like, what the fuck just happened? And there you are, and you're like, listen to this thing and whoa,
that's my favorite
incredible
thing. And that's, I feel like that everyone who's made stuff knows this feeling of like something you make, you look back, you go back the next day or the next week and you're like, wait, I did that? Like, who made that? Mm-hmm. How did I do that? Mm-hmm. That's the coolest feeling ever.
And you can never do it again. Like,
right.
You could because that's the weird thing. Once you've heard something, it's like you're not really just creating it again, because you're like you've been influenced by it. It's like someone telling you this story, and you're never going to just be able to ever imagine that.
Wow, I never thought about that. It's the same way that they say when you remember something, that what you're actually remembering is the last time that you remembered it.
Right.
Right. It's kind of the same thing where you can never hear something the first time more than once.
Yeah, no, you can't. And that's cool. That's what I do like.
Well, yeah, that's a great way to wrap it up, man. Thank you for taking the time to do it, man. This was great.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you for making me think about all these things I haven't for so long.
Hey, anytime, man. Really, that's what I'm here for. And have a great rest of your tour. Have a great rest of your day, man. And that's it.
Cool. Take care.
All right, man. Peace. Have a good one.